By the way, if
They
you
all
want to
went
buy
out.
anything, go in there.
Good evening. Welcome to the February 5th, 2019 Council Committee meeting. My name is Stephanie Meyer, Council President and Council Member from Ward 3, and I will be chairing this meeting. Besides myself, the committee members here tonight are Jim Neighbor, Ward 1, Eric Jenkins, Ward 2, Mike Kemling, Ward 2, Lisa Larson-Bonnell, Ward 3, Mickey Sandifer, Ward 4, Lindsay Constance, Ward 4, and Matt Zimmerman of Ward 1 is absent this evening. Before we begin our agenda, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. During the meeting, I will offer the opportunity for public input. If you would like to speak to the committee at any of these times, please go to the podium. I will ask that you state your name and address for the record, and then you may offer your comments. So that members of the audience can hear you, I would ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes, and after you're finished, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. There are 3 items on tonight's agenda. The first is a discussion of the electric vehicle charging stations. Electric vehicle charging stations were discussed in 2015, and the city did not move forward with them at that time. Since then, a payment platform has been established where users can pay for the electricity. KCP&L has 1 station available. Caitlin Gard, Assistant City Manager, will make a presentation tonight. Welcome, Caitlin.
Move forward at this time. So initially, this was brought forward on May 5th, 2015 to a council committee meeting. At that meeting, the council agreed to move that forward to a city council meeting. At that city council meeting, there was a very long discussion regarding that payment platform and whether the payment should be city initiated or whether it should be user initiated. As I just mentioned, there was no user payment platform at the time. There now is a user payment platform, so that's why we're relooking at this. Therefore, the city would not have to pay those electricity costs. It would be solely based on the user. There was also discussion at that May 26th meeting for the desire for KCP&L to work with the private businesses to install those charging stations on private property rather than on public property. So during that meeting, the governing body voted to table the item for 12 months, just in case a new user payment platform had been established. 12 months later, we did revisit the issue. No additional payment methods were installed at the time. So on May 3rd, 2016, the council recommended 7-1 to take no action on this. And so we kind of tabled it moving forward. So here we are again. We are aware that KCP&L has 1 electric vehicle charging station available for the city to utilize. As I mentioned, the payment stipulations have changed. The user is now able to make payments at those stations themselves rather than the host making those payments. KCP&L did come out and do a site visit, I believe it was last Friday. The city may incur some minimal cost to upgrade infrastructure, curb, sidewalk, depending on whatever location is selected. KCP&L is going to select that location, but we did recommend 2 locations for that. We are looking at the downtown corridor, just because we're trying to invigorate and revitalize the downtown corridor. We did offer 2 locations, one here in the parking lot of City Hall and one in the new parking lot located to the south of Sushi Mito. Those are the 2 locations that KCP&L is looking at. They will select a location based on what is going to be the least expensive for them to bring their infrastructure to. So we'll know that within the next following days. But as far as the discussion tonight, I just need direction from this group on if we want to move forward with this 1 vehicle charging station and if we would like to install it on a city facility.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. Quite a few people here. I will jump in and say thank you. I remember the initial conversation. I'm glad that KCP&L has changed their payment method so the city is not bearing those costs. I think I saw Jim first, and then maybe Lisa, and then Mickey.
I would just say, I think we need to take advantage of this. I also would advocate for someplace around City Hall rather than using a parking space down by Sushi Mito in that mini park, because parking's going to be tight down there.
Lisa?
I have direct experience working with KCP&L with this program. We installed 8 chargers at the hospital that I work with. And I also was intimately involved in the contract review for the KCP&L installation. And what I can say is from top to bottom, they were an excellent partner to work with. Their Clean Charge network is really a credit to the Kansas City area. I can tell you the installation was smooth. It took maybe a week longer than they thought that it was going to. And that meant that we did have some parking spots that were out of service during that time. But when the project was all done, everything was meticulous. Everything was put back into place. It was clean. We had fully functional operating chargers, and the payment method that they're talking about is very easy to use. I can tell you that from my own personal experience as well.
All right. Mickey?
So this one here is absolutely no cost.
That's right, no cost.
And anything-
Unless there's site improvements that we need to do because of the installation, a sidewalk that would need to be relocated or a curb that would need to be relocated. But as Councilmember just said, they will restore the current site to its previous status.
I know we had a lot of conversation about that before.
A lot, yes. Lindsay?
I liked your point about us working to kind of revitalize and attract new life downtown. A lot of younger folks are looking to drive EVs, and often will find a place they can plug in and go grab a cup of coffee or do some shopping. So I think if we can get this, essentially free, why not? It seems like a win-win for the city and something for the future.
Great. All right. Yeah, Mike?
Is one station charging for one car, or is
Two
one station
cars.
for how many?
2 vehicles.
Okay.
It would take up 2 parking stalls.
Okay, yeah, I was obviously opposed to the original when we were going to be paying for other people's electricity, but I feel like that issue's been resolved, so I'd be in favor of it.
Yeah, Mickey?
If they put it in City Hall and we have another one of these nights that fills up the entire parking lot and somebody parks in those spots, are we going to ticket them?
It's, I don't believe that we have an ordinance that restricts parking in electric vehicle
Okay.
parking stations.
All right.
Eric?
Yes, I would echo Councilman Kimbling's comments. I had some issues with us paying other people's power usage prior, but looks like it's no cost to the city, so we're good to go.
Are there any other comments or discussion from the council? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
So moved.
Jim? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes. Okay, the second item is to discuss revisions to policy statement number 65, Economic Development Fund related to the Shawnee Entrepreneurial and Economic Development SEED program. The Shawnee Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Council and city staff are recommending revisions to PS 65 regarding the Shawnee Entrepreneurial and Economic Development SEED program. Ann Smith Tate from the Shawnee Chamber of Commerce will present the proposed revisions. Welcome, Ann.
Council members, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come tonight to talk about the SEED program. I am sure you guys don't need much background on this, but just the SEED Economic and Entrepreneurial Development Fund is a discretionary fund that we use to attract and retain businesses here in Shawnee. I believe that it was first put in place and the policy was written back in 2012. We are uniquely positioned in the, and I think in the entire state of Kansas, but most definitely in Johnson County and the Kansas City Metro to have a deal closing fund or a discretionary fund of this nature. So it's certainly a huge benefit benefit and attribute to us doing economic development. However, I've been here now for a little over a year, we've had the opportunity to utilize this fund a little bit more. And as with anything, the more you use it, the more you see that where there is an opportunity to refine some of the existing policy. Just as a note, in the last year, we have in 2018, we were able to identify several projects that warranted the fund, and that was a total of $661,440 for the forgivable loan fund was awarded, and then we used 2 of the SBA loan funds, and that was for a total of $55,529. And I believe we also did 1 of the lease assistance programs, and I think that total was somewhere around $66,000, I believe. I don't have that number in front of me. So we met with Councilmember Jenkins and Councilmember Meyer and City Manager Centerman back in this fall, and just started talking about how we might make some of those adjustments, changes to, so that those of us that are now actually enforcing or presenting these were not the people that wrote the policy. So sometimes there's just a little bit of, we're all looking at each other going, are we interpreting this correctly? So we tried to tighten some of that down. We also expanded it in certain ways because, as was just mentioned, we are looking to push more economic development and revitalization in the downtown. So we tweaked one of the programs to allow for that, which I hope will be very beneficial. So just to go over some of the main changes, we will start with, there are certain, the forgivable loan fund allows for a percentage rebate of the withholding tax or the payroll. Additional 0.5% may be awarded for contribution to charitable organizations locally or for working with local contractors. We have tweaked this so that now has to be a reimbursable cost versus an upfront cost, so that we actually get that documentation of the charitable contribution or of the work with the contractor, the Shawnee contractor or EDC investor, before we make that reimbursement to them. So that I don't know that we've really run into any issues, but I think that this is just helps us, prevent running into any issues in the future. So we just saw that as something that could potentially pop up and maybe be an issue. So we wanted to kind of get out ahead of that before we ran into that. We've also tweaked right now. We had the minimum threshold for the forgivable loan is 10 jobs and at the county average wage. This will now, if we adopt our recommendation, would be at 120% the county average wage. So we will be using the Kansas wage survey data, and Nolan and I spoke about this this morning. So right now, the average Johnson County wage is $51,305. So if we were to do 120% of that, the jobs would need to average out at $61,566. So we did this because really our goal here is to, attract a higher income, so family sustaining wages. So that is another recommendation that we are putting forward. Documentation that we are changing is that we more closely align with that of what the Kansas Peak program does. And that's really just the program that's listed currently in the policy statement is no longer offered by the state of Kansas. So we just wanted to make sure that we were current with what their practices are. We did this past year have an opportunity to work with a local dentistry office, and they had applied for the funding. That award was made, but in just our discussion, we decided that maybe medical and dental offices weren't initially the target for this program, and so going forward, we would make the recommendation that we make that exclusion for medical and dental offices. Unless they were in, and this is where it gets a little tricky, but if they were in a speculative office building, like, for example, the Staggs Creek, which is a speculative office, that would be allowed because they are in that building. We've also recommended that loans 50,000 or under only require the city manager's approval. That is, I believe, in keeping with your procurement practices right now. So that's another change. We've also recommended a cap of the loans at $250,000. So because we have had a lot of activity, and it's been remarkable, but some of these projects, the loan amounts are starting to get fairly high. And so in an effort to be good stewards of the money and make sure that, we save something for the next project that's coming down that road, hopefully, we recommended a cap, knowing that if we were to have that, Microsoft headquarters or whatever wants to come and take a look at us, that we would have the flexibility to come back to the governing body and ask for an exception to that rule. We've also asked, right now, the process for the SEED program is that a letter of request is submitted to me, and that really is just sort of the project parameters, the amount that they're asking for, and then that recommendation is in, I may have a memo, pass the recommendation on to the city manager. We're asking for a little bit more from the applicants now, really more of a but-for statement, like help us understand why this money is crucial for the decision. Is it, so it's not necessarily prescriptive, but that it is based on merit and need, and that we are using it for what I believe were the intended purposes are to make that difference and to make sure that we are kind of that loan closing, making the difference with those funds. The lease assistance program was, the terminology was vague previously, so we've decided to tighten that up. So when we are looking at a lease, so if someone were to come in and be leasing an office space down the road, they may, in that lease amount that they're paying, also includes all the common areas, the amenities, perhaps the garage payment, all of that. So what we think would be best used for the money is really just that gross leasable area of the actual offices in which the employees will be inhabiting daily. So not the bathrooms and the hallways and the break area and the garage, but just that actual office area. So that reduces it, quite a bit. But I think, again, in an effort to be good stewards of the funds, make sure that we are saving some for the next guy. I think that's a recommendation that we had all talked about that makes a little bit more sense. As far as the lease assistance funds, one of the other, so those are still used for those primary jobs, those jobs with the certain NAICS codes as identified within the policy. What is not allowed currently are any retail and restaurants. But because we are trying to drive that kind of business to our downtown area, we believe that using a lease assistance program, similar structure to what we have identified previously, would potentially be beneficial. For these small businesses that are starting up, those upfront costs are tremendous. And if we can come up with a creative way to address some of that through a rebate of their lease, we think that that could be hopefully beneficial in attracting some of those companies. So there is a matrix that is provided within the notes that you received, but it would be a 30% for the first year, 25% the second year, and then 20% for the third year. And we would use that primarily for those projects that we see as true catalysts for the area, those restaurateurs, those retailers that will bring not only their own business, but hopefully be that magnet that will attract other like businesses to the area. And, we're working harder to make sure that our clawback requirements are just super clear for everybody when we present that information and all that. So some of that's just sort of housekeeping, tweaking, making sure that we're all on the same page, because I don't know if anybody here on the dais was part of creating that initial plan, but I know as we've had conversations with companies and stuff, we're just trying to make sure that we're doing what was intended originally. So I think that some of that's just tightening it up I know Maureen and I have had these conversations as well. So I think those kind of hit the highlights of all of there's a few little as you go through some red lines of some grammar and that kind of stuff. But any questions or anything you think I didn't cover in the suggestions?
Thank you, Ann. Lisa?
Since I'm new to this program, it sounds awesome, first of all, but second of all, what was the reason for not including medical and dental offices?
Because primarily those offices will come because of their constituency, their clients are going to be here anyway. We haven't really, they'll typically, follow their patient base. So it seemed like it wasn't necessarily used for that right intent. I think it wasn't really an identified business cluster that we've been chasing. Now, that said, if it was probably some something that I can't, think of an example off the top of my head, again, I think we would have that opportunity to say, this fits a niche that is not offered anywhere else in Shawnee, anywhere else maybe in Johnson County, and we definitely want them here within our community. And so, yeah, let's have a conversation about how we can creatively use the incentive to bring about those businesses. Yeah.
Okay. I think Eric had a question and then Jim. Oh, all right. Well, his was advanced, but whatever.
Was Vision out by Tanner's out west, were they part of the seed program?
They did. They received an SBA loan fees.
Okay, when they moved over. Just, and a couple other there. You brought up the point, good stewards and the money and things. I think only Mickey and I were here when this was established, and I think it's served us extremely well. We have the unique position to have the Economic Development Fund. And for that, when it comes to be good stewards, if we're trying to attract some restaurants and retail and we're going for 120%, I don't know exactly how that might work. And the other thing is, I trust Nolan, but I would like for the council to remain a part of this on any of the seed stuff, since we're the shepherds of that fund.
Okay. As far as the wages, so the seed forgivable loan is available only, do I keep hitting that? I'm sorry. For certain NAICS codes classification. So as of right now, restaurants, retailers would not be eligible for any of the seed programs. So what I'm suggesting is that we make those business categories available, but only if they're locating within the downtown area.
Sort of like the opportunity zone or the downtown.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand that. But as you said, it seems that we're taking this tool, which has worked very well for us, and starting to use it to drill down or hone down to make sure it's filling needs that we perceive that we have right now, particularly with the downtown.
Yeah. Yeah. There are just a few little things in there, like the lease assistance program, when people start calculating in how many square feet they are using in the garage. I mean, I think, you guys can tell me, but I think that goes beyond the original intent of what we were hoping to do. So, but there wasn't really policy statement that said it wasn't eligible. So those are the things we're just trying to tighten up.
Okay, Eric.
Okay, Jim touched on a couple of things, the two things that I was interested in talking about. The first one let's discuss is the $50,000 approval by the city manager. And while I trust Nolan 100% on that, I'm not concerned about the dollar figure. I do have some concerns about the transparency. I'd like it to be transparent. Everybody knows what we're doing with our seed program. And so therefore, bringing it before the council, I think is a good thing, but I would be happy with making that a consent item, perhaps 50,000 or less. So that way it shows up on the agenda, everybody sees it, you can go online and look it up or whatever. So it's out there for everybody to see. So that would be the first item. The second item would be, we were talking about the restaurant thing, and I do want to encourage restaurants, particularly the Neiman Corridor and downtown area. So I would like to see them be eligible for seed money, but I would like to see them exempted from that 20% over the average minimum wage for Johnson County, because the nature of restaurants and the difficulty in getting a restaurant off the ground and so on, I think it'd be good to waive that. Specify restaurants, in the verbiage so that they would be specifically exempted from that 20% requirement, but put them in, because I think that would be a good thing for our downtown, and why would we want to exclude them?
Right. Okay. We'll just make sure that that's clear in there. I did forget to mention the last item. I can't believe I forgot this one.
That's a big one.
I know, right? It's an important one. It's the most important one now. But one of the things just in our conversations, and I think that you will start seeing some Johnson County communities have adopted this, and in my discussion with other ED and chamber execs will eventually be adopting, is that companies that are receiving local incentives are required to be a part of their local chamber of commerce, participate in our local events, whether it be sponsoring an event at Old Shawnee Days or the St. Patrick's Day Parade, but just more or less to have, I guess, for lack of a better term, a little skin in the game in the community, and which has been generous to them and offering up these incentives to get them to come here. So
That raises a point,
Oh, Eric, yeah.
Yeah, on that point, I'm glad you brought that up because I had a little concern about that as well. I didn't have a concern about them being part of the chamber. I thought that was great because I think they should be, if you're willing, if you're going to do this, you're going to come looking for funds that wants to become an active member of the Chamber of Commerce. I think it's a good thing. But I was concerned about the fact that we're going to require them to host at least some event every year. And for a really small operation, I don't.
Sponsor, financially sponsored event.
Yeah,
So, and we haven't.
Sponsoring it.
So maybe that would be a good point of clarification, Ann, is there are, maybe talk a little bit about lowest levels, what the levels of sponsorship are for
Yeah, I
an
was
event.
worried
so
about
what
that
the
because I'm a
financial
small
impact is.
business, a little bitty business here, and maybe sponsoring an event might be beyond my capability, especially in those early years where I'm
Right.
trying to get off the ground. So if there's some specificity to that where, maybe a dollar amount or something, because it's kind of wide open right now. When I read it, it sounded like I got to sponsor an event if I open a business and take a seed grant, so.
Right. Well, no, I think that's a fair point too. We don't want to then turn around and say, we need you to be the presenting sponsor for 25,000. But I think if we looked at, maybe identifying some minimums, I mean, for the chamber, I mean, you can sponsor something for as, low as $250. So,
Yeah,
I mean.
and maybe
you know,
graduate it over the years, like
yeah.
the first 5-year period or whatever, 10-year period, or it could grow, at that point, but I don't know, you get too much
Yes,
government
yeah,
too.
and that's what we want to make sure, because I do think that there's, the big community events that we want to get people kind of out and involved, and I think our goal is to get, reach deeper into the companies of Shawnee and get, sometimes we just tend to see some of the same 2 or 3 people from those companies, and that's great because sometimes those are the identified community outreach people, but if there's a way to get others engaged and involved, we'd like to find that path.
Okay, yeah, and I'm good with that, it's just making sure we make it something affordable for these guys, and
Okay.
I just make that clear, that they're not sponsoring the event necessarily, but participate in sponsorship of an event
Okay.
or something like that.
No, I think that's fair. I think we can find a way to clean that up a little bit and identify minimums. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think those words actually, participate in sponsorship of an event with a minimum of so much. Yeah.
He's going to hit that line.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Any other comments or discussion from the council? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, staff is recommending forwarding the proposed revisions of PS 65 to the governing body for consideration. I would add as we head into this motion that it sounds like what we want to tweak is we would like the governing body to remain a part of the $50,000 conversation, but that is maybe a consent agenda item. We are going to exclude restaurants from the above 20% Johnson County wage requirement and look at tightening up the sponsorship minimum language for, okay. So bearing in mind all 3 of those revisions, I would accept a motion. Lisa, yeah?
Was it restaurants and retail or just restaurants?
Restaurants.
Good question. Do we,
I would think retail. 'cause you're
retail,
gonna be in
yeah,
the same-
similar wage situation.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so restaurant and retail, thank you. Okay.
I moved forward to the council.
Okay.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion passes. Okay, the third item is to discuss revisions to Title V of the Shawnee Municipal Code, SMC, related to solicitor permits, massage establishments, and therapist licenses, and the cereal malt beverage licenses. Whew. Staff will review various updates to the SMC. They are seeking direction on some of the proposed revisions. Stephen Powell, Deputy City Manager, will present several recommendations. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, I thought tonight we would just cover a couple of introductions for who's going to be presenting and then who's available for questions. And then certainly we'll talk about solicitors, massage, and cereal malt beverages. And so you all know me, but Stephanie Zaldivar is our interim city clerk, so she's going to do the bulk of the presentation for solicitors. So this will be her first time presenting in front of council. We also have Jason Bruner and Jim Baker from the police department and Lisa from the city attorney's office. And I will turn it over to Stephanie.
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm going to kind of briefly go over our solicitor permits and just kind of the process and kind of walk you through what we do when a solicitor comes in to fill out an application. So there's going to be a lot of information during these slides, so I'm just going to go over them, but feel free to interrupt, ask questions, ask for clarity as we move along. So the permit process itself, an applicant comes into the counter, the city clerk's counter, they're going to fill out an application. The clerks are going to look over that application and they're going to notarize it. We collect a $5 fee for every applicant that comes in. We request a color copy of a driver's license or a passport just to prove they are who they say they are. And then we eventually forward that information over to our police department. So we gather all that information, we scan it into our Lotus Notes database, and then it electronically goes over to the police department. So, and then since we're coming up on campaign season, thank you, Stephen. I just wanted to put it out there that, door-to-door campaigning, as well as Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things of that nature, they're not considered soliciting. So they are not part of this discussion, so to speak.
I think it's in the general ordinance and also the Constitution, probably. I think it's in the most important document. You want to carry it around with you. I'm allowed to knock on your door.
So then just to get into our background checks, the police department's here if you have any questions further than what I'm going to go over just briefly. But once we get our new and our renewals in, like I said, we send them over to our police department. They do their own internal investigations through their criminal justice systems that they have access to. And what we've come to notice and realize is that what they're checking is only going to check the local Kansas and Missouri area. So, we get a handful of solicitors that do come through that are not from the area. It makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for just this particular check to find out if they have any criminal history.
Yeah, Mickey?
I don't mean to butt into it, but I've had solicitors come to the doors that are, they say they're more or less down and out students from over in Kansas City, Missouri, coming door to door. And are they running off of a blanket permit that an individual has come in and purchased, and then they bring bus loads or van loads of these kids out and drop them off? And they're soliciting supposedly with a permit.
Yeah, each individual applicant is supposed to come through us first.
Everyone that comes to the door?
Every single person is supposed to. That's the key phrase, of course.
Are they just to wear something around their neck?
Don't have anything that requires them to wear anything external that proves they have that permit.
What is the definition of applicant? Because I could totally see a situation where a business owner comes in as the applicant,
Right.
and then they feel like they're getting permitted for all of their staff.
Yeah, so if a business would have to get like a occupational license from the city clerk's office, and then each person who's going to solicit for that business has to get their own solicitor's permit, and those renew every 30 days. And so they come in for the first permit and they bring their forms and, we notarize and all that stuff. But then when they renew it, they just have to call us and let us know that they want to renew it. And then we electronically send the original information back to the police department. They do another background check, and then we either approve or deny based on the additional background check. They can do that up to 6 times before they need to provide a new copy of their driver's license so that we always have a current driver's license. So it's not a blanket. Each individual person is supposed to carry the copy of the permit that the city issues
So
them.
if they come to your door, you can demand to see it?
Yes.
And you have a minimum age?
No.
Other than if they don't have a driver's license.
Right.
Right.
You have to use a student ID.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the permit that those are issues that, we sort of always in the back of our mind when a bunch of kids come up to the counter, and there's nothing in our ordinance that says you have to be over 16 or 16 or above to do solicitation. So. that answer your questions on that?
I would like to be able to, instead of having to ask somebody to see their permit, if we could require something where they have to show it.
Well, we're having a conversation about getting rid of the permits altogether, so I guess we have to figure that out first.
Well, I know, but still, I don't like the idea of this one, losing this one.
So just back to the background checks real quick. It's also just important for everyone to know that the reason the police department would deny a permit is based on a conviction. And the convictions are not generally put into their criminal justice systems that they search for as long as it takes to get that conviction. So when they're doing background checks every 30 days, potentially the first 60 days, they may not find a conviction. But maybe that next 30 days, that conviction has been entered, so then that would arise as to why they could potentially be denied at that point. So it takes a while. The justice system does not move too fast. So we're on to enforcement. The police department generally does their enforcement what we call complaint-based. So they don't patrol the areas for solicitors. They investigate solicitors based on a citizen calling and complaining about the solicitor, whether it be they've knocked on the door and they shouldn't have, or they're not very nice when you do have interaction with them. So their interaction with the solicitors is 90-some-odd% complaint-based. So if they do come in contact with a solicitor, that penalty is generally a $500 fine, up to 30 days in jail. Once again, it gets a lot more complicated if they're out of state. So kind of history for the calls of service, citation history. So we looked up 18 and 17, 68 calls for service, calls for investigating the solicitor. Out of that resulted 1 citation. 17 was 82 calls for service, and that came out 10 citations. So it just goes to show that, you know, the amount of solicitors that are out there, you know, 10, 11 citations per however many are out there, just generally. No.
No. Yeah, they wouldn't go door to door. You have homeless people knocking on your door?
So the next slide is just kind of some data just to kind of look at as far as the number of permits that have been issued or denied, and then how much money it costs and has costed in order to license those solicitors.
Revenue generated.
Revenue generated, I apologize. So the last 5 years, we looked at 14 through 18. You can just kind of look and see how many we've issued or denied. 16 and 17, you're going to see a rise just because we had some damaging storms come through. So with the storms coming through, it brings in more soliciting as far as can I repair your roof and your siding and all that fun stuff that goes along with it. So staff time it's taken to accept these applications, review them, and issue or deny them. New permits take a little bit longer just because they're filling out the application. We're getting copies of stuff, things of that nature. Renewals, like Steven said, they can renew every 30 days. Those don't take as long because we've already got all that information in the system. So we just shoot it off to the police department and they do their investigation from that time on. We checked with some core Johnson County cities. I mean, you can see that the majority of them that we checked with, they don't require a permit. Olathe, Overland Park, and Lenexa still enforce theirs. So just some current issues that we've run across. As you can see, there's a list. You know, limited background checks. So we've come to know that, you know, the background checks that the police department's doing for us isn't as in-depth as it could be if they come in contact with them as a result of a complaint. Kind of gives that false sense of security to our residents. You know, they come knocking on your door and they're going to assume that they're good to go, when in actuality, from what we've come to know, that we may not know if they've been convicted of anything, or they may be from out of state. We may not have access to that information. So it kind of gives. Go ahead.
Eric. Yeah.
I had a comment on this because, this seems like something that could be automated. Like you go online and apply for your solicitation permit, and it's a very simple process, but it makes you read what the rules are, and you have to, every block, everything you sign up for, you have to check the block, say, and I acknowledge I've read everything and it's good to go. And that they would have to go on record as saying they've read the city's rules regarding solicitation, and then they can print something off there that says, okay, I can go solicit. Because this is kind of ridiculous, $5 for this thing, and then we spend more staff time on that than is worth the trouble. But if we could automate that in some way where they go on to the city's website, they apply for it, they put in their information, and then they're required to read the regulations. They read the regulations, say, I acknowledge I've read the regulations, and press print, and they get a little thing that says, you're good to go. It seems like something like that would be pretty easy to do. And it would give us some sort of management of the people just running around Shawnee selling stuff.
I did have one related question to that. I had a constituent email me this morning and ask, what if we do away with the permits and then somebody does some malfeasance as a solicitor, and so the cops get called and the person who's soliciting says, well, I didn't know any of the rules. I don't have to be permitted. I assume ignorance of the law is not a defense, but how would we handle that situation?
And that is correct. We did talk to our police department and our chief, Rob Mosier, about it, and he did agree that, just because they can claim that they don't know the laws and they didn't read the laws, that doesn't mean they're not held accountable for it. So we can still enforce and will still enforce as necessary.
Okay. Lisa and then Mickey.
Go ahead.
It sounds like as a practical matter, what we're going to do is encourage people to have the no solicitation signs. And then that's really, it's sort of very black and white, whether you have a permit or not. If you are coming to somebody's door when they have that sign, that's an automatic enforceable event. So in that way, it's kind of really simple. I like Eric's suggestion of doing the automation and at least going through the process of having them read the regulations and everything, but I don't know really how we enforce that.
Yeah, in my opinion, it seems like the bad actors are going to be, it's kind of like bad guys with guns, right? Like the bad actors are going to be bad actors and probably not register, and then we're back in the same
spot. If they're a
spot.
bad actor and they didn't do well, and the police are called, they would say, okay, you're required to have your permit, which they should have gotten online.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of takes away the dumb thing where I don't know what's supposed to be the rules, because, hey, you checked the block saying you understood them and read them. So you've got some kind of hook there, to the police department can use and the city can use to manage the program, other than just a sign saying no solicitation. And I don't know, Mel, if that'd be a hard thing to do, or whether it would be something pretty darn easy to set up, or people could just apply online to get their permit and indicate they've read the rules.
And are you still envisioning that the online process would still have a background check, even though it's very limited?
No, because that's a step too far to try to do it on an automated basis.
So then I guess so the point of going through the effort to register then would just be so that someone reads the rules. I just think that it seems like if somebody comes to my door and is violating whatever the rules of being a solicitor is, I'm calling the police either way. So the short version is call the police if somebody's doing something wrong. So
and that
I just don't know
works.
what a permit does.
Yeah, I'm not saying that doesn't work, but I'm just saying that I guess I've always been on the type that, there's a zillion rules and regulations out there that people don't know. And although they can't plead ignorance of the law, I understand, I got that. But it's nice if you can say, hey, we did put it on, and you should have read it. I just think that's a nice fallback. And I'm not going to throw myself on the sword over it or anything like that, but I think it'd be a great idea if we could do some very simplified process like that.
Jim, I feel like you have an answer, yeah.
I might be able to clarify. We would have no problem enforcing the ordinance without having them had acknowledged anything at all. It would be simply, they've violated what our ordinance is, and we would be able to enforce it when we got the call, made contact with them, and found the violation.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm just trying to go one step beyond saying, we helped you with this, we put it out there for you, and you're not pleading ignorance. You look ignorant because you're pleading ignorance. So.
I just wanted to make sure that it's clear.
But
Thank you.
We have no
Yeah,
issue
thank
at
you.
all
Yeah, we can certainly enforce
issuing
it.
the notice to appear and
Sure.
enforcing the ordinance.
Mickey, did you have another question?
Yes. And I agree with Lisa. That's one of the things I was going to bring up. Second off is issuing permits, say it's a solicitor is a roofing company, and the way they travel, city to city, storm to storm, in order to put a roof on your house, they're supposed to have a city license and a city permit. Now, in order to do that, I mean, if they still had to go through this soliciting, is that checked when they're soliciting for a permit?
Yeah, if they were to come.
So
get
we
a
would be
solicitor,
eliminating that
we would
check
not-
mark.
Not necessarily, because if you're re-roofing a house, in many cases, you're going to have to pull a building permit for that.
Supposed to.
So that,
Right.
so we would check that. But also, if you are soliciting for like a roofing contractor, you have to register with the Secretary of, is it State's or Attorney General's office?
Okay.
So there is, I think, a higher level registration for those particular types of contractors that I think have had a lot of complaints of either fraud or, kind of, I hate to use the word, those fly-by-night contractors, but people who come into areas after a storm and try to sell you a roof or siding. I think, so.
You don't think that we're hurting ourselves in that manner?
No, because just off the top of my head, I mean, Stephanie and I looked at our list of solicitors again today, and most of them are not contractor-type businesses.
Okay.
They're selling other things, or pest control is a big one. Young Teens for America is probably the ones that come to your neighborhood, the younger folks. But when we do have weather events, we do see an increase in some of the more contractor-based businesses that solicit. And any of our local contractors or businesses who do solicit already have the license that or the occupational license that they need. So I can't say it's not going to be an issue, but
yeah.
I haven't experienced that so far. So that answer your question, or okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. So as we've found out, a permit is not going to guarantee that anyone is going to follow our Shawnee Municipal Code. Just because they have that permit does not mean that they're going to abide by the rules. So the permit itself does not regulate the content of speech. There's other surrounding cities that do not have a permit requirement that we saw from the previous slide. And there's no way for anyone to ensure that every single solicitor out there has a permit. So these are kind of some of our proposed revisions to the regulations that we're proposing. What is in red is what we're proposing. So between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., it used to be 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So we want to kind of tweak that a little bit. And then, nothing else has changed. So once again, this is what it is now. There are no revisions to this. So the new verbiage that we're going to propose is in green, and it just says, cut across someone's yard to access neighboring property, they have to use a sidewalk or driveway. On any city-owned parking lot or sidewalk that connects to a city-owned building and serves as the primary ingress or egress. So in other words, they cannot block entrance to public buildings or facilities. And then if they're 16 or older, they must carry a government-issued photo. So the staff recommendation on this is to forward to the governing body for consideration is to eliminate that $5 permit requirement, expand our regulations. Once again, enforcement will be the same. It's going to be predominantly complaint-driven, and public outreach and education. Any questions?
Lisa?
If we decide to move forward with eliminating the permit requirement, I think Councilmember Jenkins's comments are important and worthwhile. And so I would like for us to look at our Shawnee website and see how easy and accessible these rules are. And that they're mobile compatible. Because if you have people walking around, they need to be able to see it on their cell phone.
Right. Absolutely agreed. That would be one of the first things we would do is make sure that all of our web presence was updated. We'd put stuff out in CityLine. We'd make sure that the little no solicitor stickers, I think you saw one on one of the slides, were available at all of our facilities, city events. We hand them out at the open house. We routinely mail them to people who call and request them. I think we've even gotten some pricing on having a peel and stick one that's actually embedded in CityLine, so every single family home could just peel it off their CityLine and put it on their door. So really trying to get that no soliciting sticker out there. But on the flip side, you could also use a no trespasser sign or a similar sign, and that would still be able to be enforced. So yeah, we would definitely contact our current solicitors. We have means to contact all of our business owners about new rules and regulations. So we would really do everything within our power to get the word out there to as many people as possible. Yeah, it's a neat one. Yeah. So.
Okay. Any other discussion from the council on this? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Yep, Nick, come on up, and if you'll just state your name and address for the record at the podium, that'd be great.
Hi, thanks for the time. Nick Reed, 22409 West 48th Street, sorry, in Shawnee. So I guess my comment would be that, I would caution against the getting rid of the permit. I think what we're missing in the discussion is the deterrent that the permit is. We say, okay, it's not going to catch everybody. That's fine, but if I've done door-to-door when I first started the office, and if I know I have to fill that out, if I'm a sexual offender or, have a felony or something like that, I'm not even gonna try. If I'm gonna follow those rules, we know how many people we've caught and didn't allow those things, but how many people didn't even bother applying because they know that that's not gonna pass. We say like the bad actors are gonna do it anyway, but we also require building permits and we have speed limits, and we know that's not gonna keep everybody from finishing a basement that, without a permit or something like that, but it's setting an expectation, and there are going to be some of those people who go outside the lines, but that's not everybody who's doing it, So there's I feel like if we don't have that, we're putting the burden on the resident to call the police when somebody is knocking on the door like that, who's not, you have a no soliciting sign or something like that. And I know, as a nice person, it's hard for me to call the police on a person who knocks on my door. I have a no soliciting sign. It happens frequently enough. And they say, well, it wasn't really a sales call. I was just wanting to let you know about this pest control system. And I'm like, well, that's a sales call. But I don't call the police because I don't want to burden the police with that scenario, So of the times where we do show complaints and citations, that's probably a small fraction of people who have been either just inconvenienced, or some people I know I talk to are like scared of strangers knocking on their door. So we're allowing, by getting rid of this barrier, we're allowing more people to just stop by. As a business owner, I don't do it because I know, it's not really worth my time, but I got to get a permit. And if I didn't have that, I could just stop by and knock on some doors on the way home from work. No big deal. There's no hurdle to jump in that scenario. So I think it does deter a lot of people from doing door to door because we know we have to have a permit. So I wanted to make sure that was out there. If the issue is cost and time to the city, which I get, it's a process, and the background check does make it a little more difficult, but I think the background check is, key to the deterrent. I did do a cursory look at it, and like Prairie Village's permit is $12, Missions is $10, Leewoods is $10, Fairways is $50. So why are we at $5 when we could be at easy 10, even 15 if we really want to make that a thing? And all of those places also on their websites have a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. So you can't be expected to walk in, 5 people at a time and walk out with a permit and go solicit later. You have to submit it and then come back, a day later. So if we have those things in place, it's not oh, I thought I was going to get all these things done today, but now I got to issue these 5 permits. It's okay, we'll come back. I mean, that's how we have to do permits. So, so anyway, I just felt like that's a deal is, the complaints and everything. It's just a small window of what's going on out there. And if we just open the floodgates to just say we don't need permits anymore, then it's going to increase those things. And, it's going to inconvenience our people, so.
Thank you, Nick. I think really good points. I mean, that's another alternative. I suppose we could increase the cost quite a bit. Yep. So, yep. Lindsay? Mm-hmm. Lindsay, I was hearing Lisa.
Did we look into charging more? Was there that conversation going into this, charging $50, for example?
We did discuss increasing the fee, but at the end of the day, because we realized that even if we were to increase the fee, the people who are not going to pay the fee could just still go out and solicit, and we would never know. So while Mr. Reed, is that his name, Nick, brings up some good points, but after we kind of looked at sort of our policies and the background checks and the limited scope of those background checks, and the fact that we know there are, from time to time, we do have handfuls of not only out of region, but like kids from Utah coming in to solicit, which are a lot of those contracting type of companies. We just felt like if we were to increase the fee, while we might deter people from getting the permit, possibly because they had a conviction or something, but also possibly because they didn't want to pay the fee. So there's really no way to say if we increase the fee that we would deter all of the people who have a conviction on their record that would disqualify them from having the permit. Yeah, on the flip side, you could deter people who normally would come in and pay the $5 and get the permit. So, which is a strategy, but.
I think increasing the permit's a pretty good idea if we're gonna have a permit, because the amount of time that I saw in this presentation that's involved in processing this, I mean, we'd have to have employees working for like $8 an hour or something. I don't think we got too many of those, so I could see definitely raising the permit and maybe even specifying the cost within that cost in that range, saying 10% for the application fee, $15 for the background check. And that money should, I think, go right to the police department for their time and effort to help defray costs for our PD.
Lindsay?
One more question, and maybe for our police officers. Do we have a lot of instances of a solicitor coming to the door and, I don't know, trying to, what would be the examples of malfeasance that we are worried about with somebody coming to the door? So we're trying to keep folks safe. What would be an example of something that a solicitor would do besides be annoying? Right? Yeah. I guess that's my question. Is there a big problem we're trying to solve in which there are solicitors coming to the door and trying to break in or truly causing harm? Or are we talking about the fact that we feel annoyed?
I mean, granted, we can't calculate how many people don't call the police, but we're looking at 68 calls for service. We ran 20 last year, 20,000 calls for service, and so only 68 of them had to deal with solicitors. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big problem. We're not seeing it as an issue.
Okay, thank you.
And there's one other thing I want to say on that, on the background checks. There was a point in there that talked about the false sense of security. When you say background check, it's not like being a police officer, or it's not like this is a licensing background check. So when we say the scope is limited, it's extremely limited. It has to deal with a conviction. So if someone goes to Lenexa and they get charged with burglary, they break into someone's house, and they don't have a conviction, we still have to approve that. So based on that conviction, we're really, really limited in that scope. A lot of the background checks that we do, like if I contact someone on a traffic stop, that background check on them, because it's an investigatory stop, an investigatory detention, we can do a better background check on that than what you're getting by the permit background. That makes sense?
Fix that.
Lisa, yeah.
That was my question. I mean, there are private companies that we could be paying for, and we could have it as a pass-through cost as part of the permit to do a more thorough background check, at least one that would be more states than just Kansas and Missouri.
Well, the problem relies then is you still have to have that conviction. So, where are they getting we have to find out where they're getting their information. Is that, we have to just determine and write that, we'd have to change the code, I guess, to be where we'd want to find that. And I know we did look at costs on that, and I think it was $35 per person. It was right around in there, wasn't it? $35 to have a private company do to do this check on them.
I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of us expanding a background check beyond just convictions, because we have a criminal justice process for a reason, and we shouldn't be holding things against people until they have been fully adjudicated. So that's okay, but limiting it to 2 states seems silly.
Yeah, and I don't know what you're going to get with those companies. I really don't know, because we can only look at criminal stuff, our scope. We can run an NCIC stuff, but that has to be investigatory. We can't do that for licensing. It says right in there, you cannot do this for licensing. So we can't run those checks. And so that would be that's the national database for that stuff. So I don't know how a private company would be able to do that either.
Basically, all you do is a local agency check, that's it, huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do employers do it, though? I mean, like, there are lots and lots of regulated employers that have to do very robust background checks. I work for one of them, and I now you have me questioning our entire system, so thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure if you sign some sort of waiver, they can do something.
Probably all fine. Okay. Is there any other discussion from the council on this item? Anyone else from the public who would like to speak on it? If not, Stephen, if you don't mind, maybe we forward this one and we'll just take them in pieces.
That'd be great.
Okay. So staff is recommending that we forward revisions to Chapter 5.56 regarding solicitors and eliminating the permit requirement to the governing body for consideration. It sounds like we're a bit split on that. So if anyone has an idea for a motion or what they're thinking, let's have it. Yeah, Lindsay.
I move to forward the revisions to the governing body for consideration.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes with Councilmember Jenkins voting in dissent. Item 2.
Okay, the next topic is massage establishments and massage therapists. And so these are some revisions that we've sort of kept track of over the years as we've licensed our massage folks. And essentially, we have 2 licenses, and you all approve massage establishments. The city clerk approves massage therapists. And so what we're proposing is to allow the city clerk to approve the massage establishments to kind of streamline that process. So they would still have to meet all the same requirements. They would still, the only change would be, once we checked off that they met all the requirements, then the clerk could issue the massage establishment license. And that just kind of streamlines that process, because what could happen is that you could have a business ready to go, and now they're just waiting 2 weeks for the city council meeting. And so that's one change. We checked with other cities, particularly Overland Park, as we've worked with them on our last massage ordinance, and they've made a lot of changes to theirs. So we looked to them as a model, and that was a change that they made, was to allow the city clerk to approve licenses. So that would mean the only business license that the governing body would approve would be cereal malt beverage licenses, and that's state law.
Yeah, Mickey?
On the massage therapist licenses,
Uh-huh.
are we one of the highest priced licenses in Johnson County?
Our massage therapist licenses are only $25 a year. So I don't think we're one of the
Okay.
highest.
And if you wanted to put it, and what are the licenses for massage therapists to have an office?
That's the massage establishment
$300?
license. It's $300 for a new license and $150 for a renewal license.
Okay.
So it's pretty much in line with what most of our core cities
I
are
think
charging.
Overland Park's 100.
That might be for their renewal,
Okay.
but their new licenses are pretty much in line with ours. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I was just,
yeah.
okay.
Good question, though. So speaking of fees, one of the other recommendations, whenever we make revisions to business licensing, we take the fee out of the ordinance and put it into a licensing fee schedule. And so we did that 2 years ago with all of our alcohol license fees. We've done it with any of our animal permits. And really what that does is it creates one fee schedule, and hopefully over time that will grow to be a citywide fee schedule, which would make it a lot easier for people to find fees and make it easier for staff to review and update fees. But essentially, it also would mean that if we ever did want to increase our fees, we wouldn't have to publish an ordinance to amend our code to change a fee. We could just change it through our policy statement code. So we've been slowly moving our fees out of our code and into policy statements because it's just a little bit easier to track those and amend those. And then one item that we are looking for some direction from the governing body on is when it comes to revoking or suspending a massage establishment license. Currently, that is under the purview of the governing body, but we're recommending to allow the clerk to revoke or suspend a license and then add some language that would allow that licensee to appeal that decision to the municipal judge. So we followed this same process, probably a little over 10 years ago when we revised our special animal permits. Mickey, you may have been the only one on council at that time when if you had more than 2 dogs and the clerk couldn't approve it, then it came to council and the neighbors battled it out and it was awful. Yeah, it was not a good meeting when we had one of those on the agenda. So we changed all that back then to allow the clerk to approve and deny, and then those folks who do get denied can appeal to the judge. We've only ever had to do that one time and it worked. It was a much better setting to do that in a municipal court environment than in a city council environment. So that would be one area that we would want some direction. And I guess I would caveat that to say, if you all want to keep approving massage establishment licenses, then I would say maybe you all also keep the revocation and suspension, but we do need to probably add some type of an appeal language to that. But
Okay, Mickey?
I would agree with Stephen, and as we talked earlier, we had one incident that we were going to talked about pulling one some years back, and all we did was made a threat and everything straightened out. I mean, they backed out and everything was right. I mean, we've never had an issue, so I don't have a problem giving it to the.
yeah, we do, there are lots of requirements that therapists and establishments have to abide by. So, we've always, I feel like, done a good job of getting them to the point to where,
Right.
I think all of our massage establishments are highly respectable. The therapists meet all of our requirements, and from a licensing standpoint, it just seems more of a administrative function than a governing body function. And all of our other licenses, for the most part, are kind of follow that same path.
Lisa?
Is this one of those things that we could bring through on the consent agenda? It seems weird that the governing body would sort of have no notice whatsoever that we were revoking licenses for businesses. And if we had a rogue city clerk, for instance.
Got to
we would
watch out
have
for us.
City manager.
Well, the way the code is written now, you have to have a public hearing. So it would not be a consent agenda type of item. Is that what you were?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we keep the code the way that it is right now. I think that your revisions are reasonable, and I don't want to take that power away from you. I would just kind of like to be given a heads up that, hey, FYI.
You know, and we could send an email to the governing body if we run into that situation to make sure you all are notified of the issue.
We have.
Because if something really came up and you were really concerned, we could still be involved.
And we, the one issue that we did have was, probably over 10 years ago.
It was.
And, I think the police were heavily involved in whatever was going on there. So they forfeited their license and moved on, but.
You needed a soliciting license.
Yeah, there's a couple things here. I like the idea of perhaps putting it on the consent agenda as a possibility, because that way, if there is an issue, it can be pulled from the consent agenda by the council member at the time of the meeting. If they have knowledge of something that perhaps hadn't been shared and they want to do something about it, they could. But I'm not really hung up on that particularly, because I like the fact that it'd be nice and clean. The rules and regulations are very straightforward, and they're regulated even beyond the city. So I don't know if we really have a problem with the administrative process of the city clerk granting that license. And I actually like the fact that they can revoke the license, because that's very quick.
Yes.
I mean, maybe 2 weeks before the next council meeting, but the city clerk could, boom, you lost your license, they can snatch it right then, and they can go appeal to the court or whatever they want to do. So there's some real positive aspects to that. I mean, I could accept the language you got here.
And again, I think if that language did get adopted and we did have to revoke a massage establishment, like a business, it would be, the reasons would be pretty severe. They would have to be, yeah. So you all would definitely be updated well in advance of that. But it does give us a little bit more, makes it a little faster if we actually needed to pull that trigger. But again, like I said, thankfully we have a good long-term massage establishment base here, so that's good. Okay, and then, so for the therapists, again, we would move those licensing fees into the policy statement, not changing the fees at all. We would add an appeal process. So currently, as I said before, the clerk can approve these, and the clerk can deny them, but there isn't really an appeal process, a good one in the code. So we would add a very similar appeal process for that. And then the biggest change would be to update some of our education requirements. And so currently, applicants for massage therapy have to provide proof that they've completed 500 hours in a course of massage therapy, or they can show that they successfully completed the National Certification Examination for Therapeutic Massage and Bodywork. And so what we're proposing is to follow a change that Overland Park made, which is where they have to show the 500 hours, and they have to show that they either passed the National Bodyworks test or the Massage and Bodywork Licensing Examination, also known as MBLEX. And the benefit to doing that is that in order to even be eligible to take that test, you have to have completed the I think one of the tests is actually 700 hours. So the minimum is 5, the other one is 750, I believe. But in order to do that, they verify that educational component. And where that could be extremely helpful for us is that we are currently trying to verify the education that people submit. And so where that becomes problematic is when someone has graduated from a school that is no longer in operation. And so last year, we had a therapist who came in and applied, and we, sent it over to the police to do their investigation. And I think Brunner spent hours and hours just trying to contact somebody who could verify this person's education, and come to find out the school had been closed by the state of Illinois because they had been known to produce false transcripts. And so by requiring proof of one of those two tests, then we know that they have gone through the training that they need to go through. And we did contact most of our massage establishments here in the city and just asked them if we were to change this, would that prohibit them or make it more difficult to attract massage therapists? Would it make it, limit your applicant pool? And the overall consensus was that they didn't think that it would, and probably half of them thought that it was a good idea because since the state doesn't license massage therapists, people who are really making this their career want those certifications because they really are like your credentials. I mean, they are.
Majority of them go for the national.
Yeah, a lot of them do. So the intent would be that anyone who's currently licensed as a therapist, they would just renew every year like they always do. But any new therapists would need to follow this new rule. And then the last revision is not really related completely to therapists, but we do have an exception to the code. So if you're a doctor or a chiropractor or a physician, you're exempt. And if you're a massage therapist working under the direct control of one of those folks, you're also exempt. And so the intent of that is really to exempt those folks who are using massage therapy on their patients as a course of their treatment. And so what we've encountered recently, the last couple of years, is that more and more chiropractors are wanting to offer massage therapy as an expanded type of business model, to where they'll hire a massage therapist to see their patients, but they also want that therapist to be able to bring in their own clients and just do massage therapy. And so we really felt like that was not the true spirit of that exemption. And so we tightened that up just a little bit to say that in order for that exemption to apply, the therapist can only provide that massage therapy if it's like prescribed by that physician or chiropractor, so that we're kind of just tightening that up and making it a little bit more clear that just because you're a doctor or a physician and you're hiring a massage therapist, that therapist can't also go off and see their own patients, and because then they would have to comply with all of the facility requirements that are in the code. So the number of bathrooms and doors and changing rooms and that type of stuff, because then the business kind of becomes more like a massage establishment than purely a chiropractor's office or a doctor's office. So just kind of tightens that up. And that's how we've been licensing those folks now, is whenever a chiropractor calls and asks about it, that's what we tell them, that the intent of our exemption is that your therapist has to be under your direct control, meaning that he or she is only seeing your patients, not also seeing private clients. So.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion or questions from the council? Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? Okay, if not, the staff is recommending that we forward revisions to Chapter 5.40 regarding massage establishments and therapists to the governing body for consideration. I would accept a motion with the caveat then, just to clarify, that we are directing that the city clerk take over the ability to revoke and suspend
And
license.
approve.
Yes, and approve. Yes, thank you.
Move to forward.
Okay,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes.
Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk
samples
about
or anything?
beer.
I don't know if I want 3-2 beer.
Yeah.
Across the street.
Break out the samples.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not clear on this. Can we get a sample?
It's,
And since we no
it's
longer have our water
confusing.
bottles, I'm
It's
getting
inherently
thirsty.
confusing. Okay, so recently the state changed the cereal malt beverage laws. And for those of you who don't know the difference between cereal malt beverage and alcoholic liquor, cereal malt beverage is beer with up to 3.2% alcohol. If it's over 3.2%, the state classifies it as alcohol. And so you can get a license, a cereal malt beverage license, which you all approve those, the new ones as well as the renew ones every year. And you can sell on premise, meaning your restaurant or bar. So you're selling it by the drink or I'm sorry, on premise is your restaurant or bar, selling it by the drink. Off premise is that it's packaged, so like a convenience store or a grocery store. So on April 1st, 2019, the law changes or goes into effect. And so all of our businesses that currently have a CMB license would be able to sell beer containing up to 6% alcohol by volume. And they would be able to accept delivery of that beer beginning on March 1st, but they wouldn't be able to sell it until April 1st. So that allows people to stock up. And then any of our licensed retail liquor stores would be able to also sell CMB. Yes. And so basically we're asking you to tell us to prepare an ordinance to make those changes happen. One other thing that just kind of came up today is in last year, the state changed some of the hours of operations. And so most of you were on council when we did the full revision of our alcohol regs about 2.5 years ago. And we changed our hours of operations for some of our establishments to be consistent with state law. And a couple of those have since changed. So for instance, drinking establishment, which would be like Chili's, just like your restaurant that has a bar. And then farm wineries, which unfortunately we don't have any, can sell per state law between the hours of 6 a.m. and 2 a.m. So if we want to stay consistent with state law, which I think is a pretty good idea, then we would also include that change. So if you were et cetera, or a business that, had an early morning crowd. I know in Missouri, when they made that change, a lot of it was for people working night shift and
Bloody
sort
Mary.
of their like happy hour started at 6 a.m. before they all went to bed, but I don't know. Don't know if that's the reason for Kansas amending that, but I suspect it was because some of the other establishments already had this as their operating hours, so I suspect it was to make it more consistent across the board. So.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion from the council on this item? Anyone from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, staff has recommended that we direct them to prepare an ordinance amending Chapter 508 regarding alcoholic liquor and cereal malt beverages to be in compliance with the state's new cereal malt beverage laws that go into effect on April 1st, 2019 to the governing body for consideration. I will accept a motion.
Move to forward Chapter 508 changes to the council.
All right, have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. And then one final cleanup. We need to forward all of the proposed recommendations and revisions for PS 56 regarding licensing fees to the governing body for consideration. I will accept a motion.
So moved. Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Great. And those will show up on the February 25th council agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, and Stephanie, and Jim, and everyone.
Motion
That
to adjourn.
concludes our agenda. I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned.